To this, the regularly scheduled Shelburne Select Board meeting of Tuesday, June 11th, 2019, which I now call to order. The first item is to approve the agenda. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Jamie moves.
Seconded.
Mike seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Colleen and Mary not voting for reason of not being present. The third item is to approve Select Board meeting minutes of May 28th and May 31st. In the case of May 31st, we have one of the three of us who were present, not present tonight, in which case we'll have to pen those. Is there a motion on May 28th?
Move to approve the Shelburne Select Board meeting minutes of May 28th, 2019.
Jamie moves.
Seconded.
Mike seconds. I've got a couple of comments on number 2, Lee. The agenda approval was 3-0 with Colleen and Jamie not voting.
Right.
And Bill Supple should be added to the others present. Making those editorial changes, is there any other discussion? Hearing none, those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and those opposed, nay. Again, Mary and Colleen not voting. The next item are public comments, which we begin with the new library and town center project update given by Ruth.
Hello. So let's see, we have our trailer meeting every other Tuesday, so we had one today, and one of the interesting facts that we discovered was that lately we've had over 40 people on the site on a daily basis working on the building, which for a site that size, 40 people, that's a lot. You can see, I think, that they've ramped up the schedule outside, so they've laid in curbs. They're getting ready to do the asphalt. They've done some cutting, some milling. People are going to need to watch for an announcement from Lee telling people the dates when the asphalt will be placed out there, because that's going to interfere with traffic in the parking lot, and when the curb cut occurs on 7, because we're going to be widening the entrance onto 7. So basically, there's going to be maybe 2 days where that entrance is not basically available. So Lee will do his usual announcement for that. I think when you stand now and you look at the building from the outside, you look towards the south side, you see these gigantic structures coming down. Those are the rain gutters, so they're open, and the rain will fall towards the roof slants to the south, so the rain's going to come down, come into those rain gutters, and then come down in a waterfall effect, and then go straight into the storm drains below them. So, yeah, they're really cool looking. We should be able to test them out here in a couple days. I think it's going to rain. Basically, everything outside is still going on. They're still working on putting in the windows. They've got doors to put in. Inside, we have the same thing going on. We have stairs going in. We have window frames going in inside because there's some interior windows. We have door frames going inside. The millwork has started to come in, the mock-ups for the millwork, for the woodwork, so that we can see, make sure that we agree that this looks like what we thought it was going to look like, so they can go ahead and start getting that in. So inside is just, every time I go in there every couple of days, and it's astonishing what happens over the course of 2 or 3 days. Town Hall really has gotten to the point where they're talking about a punch list. So Town Hall is just about done. There's still some exterior work, some painting, and some of the grading needs to be finalized around Town Hall, but it's really coming down to a close, and it looks really great inside. I'm very excited. I know everybody's going to be really impressed with how Town Hall has come back. So that's really all I have. I don't know, anybody have any questions? All right.
Any questions?
Ruth, we had talked at one point about a tour.
Right, and that's still on the books. Lee and I have talked about it a couple times, and I think we were going to talk about it again.
Yeah, we need to chat about that. It's a tricky piece of the puzzle.
With 40 people.
It'd be nice to do as a board meeting, but then it's a public meeting, and we don't have 40 hard hats. So how we juggle that is an interesting logistical question, to do it right by everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ruth. Other comments, other public comments? Hearing none, seeing no hands. The next item is it's our select board comments. Do you want to start off, Mike?
I don't have any this evening, thank you.
Jamie?
No comments.
I have just one brief one, and it's apropos Ruth's report. The time has passed, it seems, very quickly for the rest of us, but For those involved in the library project, it's been a slow, steady haul, and at points not an easy one. And it's not too early to say thank you again to the trustees, to whom Ruth leads, to the committee, the project committee on which Lee sits and which is ably headed by Kathy Townsend, and to someone who doesn't get a lot of recognition through nobody's fault is Al DiPietro, who's the clerk of works. That's a pretty demanding job, as some of us know. It's how he manages in his head to carry all that detail around with just a little thin clipboard's beyond me. But we've been very reliant on his effort, and we appreciate it. Any other comments? Hearing none. Next is the town manager report.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to echo that. Al DiPietro has been worth his weight in gold as a clerk of the works for the town. He's been really great to work with. I'd like to introduce Nini Anger, who's our new assistant in the town manager's office. Off and running for the first week, and she's come back for more. And we're very glad to have her here.
You are most welcome. We're happy to have you join the family of not only staff but community. So we're very appreciative that you accepted the offer and look forward to working with you.
And longtime resident of Shelburne.
Yep.
Just a couple other quick announcements. The annual Back to the Beach event will be on next Tuesday, the 18th, from 6 to 8 p.m. at Shelburne Beach. All are invited to bring a side dish or a dessert to share. Burgers and hot dogs will be provided. Hopefully it'll be a night like this. As some of you have mentioned earlier, the paving on Falls Road and that area has begun today. Thank you, Paul and the crews. And hopefully the weather will continue to cooperate and get that work done as best we can. I know it's been a long haul for the residents in those neighborhoods. And as Ruth mentioned, we are going to be beginning the work to widen the driveway here to town campus. That may begin as early as this Friday. It will make access in and out of the site somewhat challenging for all of us for certainly the first few days and potentially several weeks while that work continues on. So we will be trying to get more information out. Welcome. But please be aware, to those who are here, those who are in the viewing audience, that access in and out of town center will be tough for a couple of weeks. If you're coming to see any of us here at the town campus over the next few weeks, it might be better to park across on Church Street and walk across the crosswalk, where we will, within the month, I hope, have the flashing beacon at long last. Parts have been ordered, contractors lined up to install it, and that and some other improvements will be happening this season. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Lee. The next item, are there any discussion, comments? The next item is to set a public hearing date for proposed zoning amendments regarding accessory apartments. Do you want to ask Dean to do a brief summary for us?
Fairly pro forma here. The Planning Commission's proposed zoning amendments that would make it easier for homeowners to add accessory apartments on their property. They've approved these, asked us to warn a public hearing to consider approving those. I would suggest July 9. It's the soonest possible date we can warn it, and it helps keep that moving forward. I hope it will be a fairly simple hearing process.
As a very brief summation, the proposal would make all accessory apartments, by the proposal, all accessory apartments would be treated as permitted uses. In the present case, some are and some are conditional uses. And additionally, there's a cap, an area cap of 1,500 square feet. So those of you who have an interest in the subject, we invite your attention, and we now embark on a period of review and public hearings. And in this case, we would be looking for a motion to set the date July 9th, correct?
So moved.
Moved by Colleen.
Second.
Seconded by Jamie. Any further discussion?
Can I ask a question? Is on the 9th, we'll be getting a presentation, or we'll be sort of going through the issues more carefully? Is that the
Sure.
idea? Okay, great.
Yeah, tonight's
Beginning
just
of
the,
it.
It'd be the full-blown.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, those approving, please signify by saying aye. Aye. In this case, Colleen's voting and Mary is not. The next item is to consider a donation in the memory of Tom Little's son. This is a proposal to the board to expend $250 out of funds available to it for these and such general purposes, to be donated to one of the organizations that the Little family designated as a preference. It would be in the name and in memory of Thomas Bayer Chauncey Little, who, as you know, is the son of Tom and Susan. And I will comment that misfortune sometimes terribly and cruelly follows more misfortune. And in this case, we've lost another young man, also a son of a community leader, and that is Don Stevens' child. Don is a spiritual leader of this community, the tribal chief of the Nulhagan Abenaki, and our condolences and wishes and thoughts for a long, long time of happy memories are with he and his wife, Diana, and the family. At some point in the future, we'll consider what might be an appropriate memorial to that loss. And I'd ask you at the moment to take to observe a bit of silence and reflect on this particular loss, which was just recent. And we thank you very much. The next item is the Village Bike Ped Set.
Do we need a motion?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, that'd be handy.
Move to approve a donation in the amount of $250 from the Select Board's discretionary fund in memory of Thomas B.C. Little to the organization of the Little's choosing.
Moved by Jamie,
I'll second.
seconded by Mike. Any discussion? Any discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Thank you, Jamie.
Okay.
The next item is the Village Pedestrian Safety Group. In a day of United Nations, you can maybe be excused if you missed the 118th one, but it's inexcusable on my part, so thank you. In this case, we have been have this presentation been provided generally to the public?
There are printouts in the back seat over there.
Okay.
There's additional ones.
All right,
Jeff,
so
your
for those of you who want to refer
Yeah,
to it,
just-
yeah,
There's a typo that was in this one that I picked up.
yeah.
Right, so.
Want to let us know who you are, Jim, and
Okay. So, the Village Pedestrian Safety Group thanks you for letting us present today. My name is Jim White, and my part is to quickly outline the basic strategies and specific changes we propose as next steps. Jeff McBride will then offer some fascinating graphics that he has created that will visualize those changes. Because we have limited time, I'm going to just charge ahead here so that we have a few minutes at the end for any questions or comments. First, let me say that our starting point is the vision that was so well articulated in the town plan. From that, we created several assumptions. I'm only going to share a couple of them with you. One is that Upper Falls Road, which is our focus here, is a key section of road. Two reasons. First, it's clearly dangerous where the sidewalk abuts the road. Second, it's a major arterial road for shoppers, visitors, residents, and commuters. The second assumption is that changes we propose for Falls will offer lessons that potentially could be applied to other roads in Shelburne. So we have basically two strategies that we're going to talk about and show pictures of. The first we call a must-do strategy, and in fact, a lot of the changes are already underway from this must-do strategy. Essentially, the must-do strategy is more economical, and it prioritizes traffic speed and pedestrian and bike safety. What's been completed or almost completed includes 4 crosswalks. Those are partially completed. Placement of mid-crosswalk signs, which are seasonal only, a lower speed limit, and a permanent radar sign going north. What's been approved and budgeted but not yet completed is a narrowing of car lanes from 12 feet to 10 feet, a permanent radar sign going south on Falls, Upper Falls. Everything I'm talking about has to do with Upper Falls. Adding a grass strip on the east side, roughly from just north of the post office to the pumping station, and expanding the bike path along that grass strip. So what's new would be adding 2 speed tables between the cemetery crosswalk and the first house going into the village to the north. We would also add signs announcing that speed tables were ahead. We also propose creating a temporary barrier with plastic bollards where the sidewalk is right next to the road. This is not a particularly attractive solution, but it is an interim solution that we feel is needed. In addition, we advocate for no parking signs along the east side of the town parade ground. In addition, at the Church Street Falls intersection, we would like to add either a stop sign or a pedestrian-controlled light or a constantly flashing yellow light. And finally, we'd like to see more traffic enforcement in this area until driving habits are changed, at which point it's likely that we could reduce that enforcement over time. So the other strategy we have is called a should-do strategy. It's different in that it will involve more cost and more processing by the town and be longer in the implementation. Its focus is on a comprehensive road design that's more fully in line with the town plan. And it integrates the needs of all users of the road, including motorists, and maximizes aesthetics. So all of these items would be new. First, at the shopping center entrance, we would advocate for extending the median to shorten the long and dangerous entrance crosswalk at the shopping center entrance. Second, we would advocate for constructing comprehensive street design that provides 2 car lanes, 1 4-foot bike lane, a green strip, and sidewalk with curbs along the whole length of Upper Falls Road from the shopping center right down to the 4-way stop at Marset. What this might involve is shifting, extending road pavement on the west side of Falls as you approach the village to make room for a bike path and effective sidewalk on the east side of the road. It might involve rebuilding the sidewalk from the shopping center entrance right down to the pumping station. We also advocate for installing street lamps all along Upper Falls Road. And finally, we would like to reduce portions of the very wide grass strip on Falls Road immediately north of the 4-way stop with Marset in order to add enough pavement for a bike lane in that section of the road. That's essentially it. So I'm going to turn it over to Jeff so you can see what this looks like.
Is there a remote that could move to this? Just come over and press the button.
Yep.
Cool. That sounds good. All right. So, Jeff McBride. So we basically have here a presentation that takes you from the big picture down to the small picture. So it explains not just the what, but the why, which for us is a really big deal. We're focused really on the town as part of what we're doing. Oh, thanks. That's a good idea. All right. So this is taken straight from the town plan. First item, first objective this is page 8, which is the first objective for the entire town, is to maintain the town's configuration. Compact, prominent village center, closely connected to the surrounding residential neighborhoods. So that is really what we're proposing. Under the future land use for the Shelburne Village objectives is to recognize that having a physical environment that rewards walking is the key to creating a superior public realm in the village. This is maintaining and enhancing accessibility within and to the village by expanding pedestrian routes within the village and connecting the village to surrounding areas and facilities. So we're trying to keep this right in the wheelhouse of the town plan. In here, obviously everybody here knows, growth area 1 is the village, and this is really the goal for the town, is to focus growth and development in that village center. As you get closer looking in, there's a sort of a barbell relationship between the village center and up towards Route 7, Upper Falls Road as they connect towards the crosswalk or the traffic light, and then the village residential in Shelburne Falls are carried towards the south. We've been really focused on the village residential area to the south, and really these 3 major roads in particular. We've broken it out and called Upper Falls Road and Lower Falls Road, despite being called Falls Road the whole way for clarity. But these are the 3 major roads that connect the residential village, and they connect the residential village into the town. We've shown interest in Route 7, but we also recognize that we're focused on the portion that is really within our capability to work on. I know that there's a lot of work that could be done on Route 7. We completely agree with that, but we're trying to focus strongly on the roads that we can have the greatest impact. And as we've looked at these roads, we've really looked at a bunch of ideas. So this is showing those 3 roads, and we've got ideas all over the place in terms of what we can do, where we can do, what it is, how we could do it. And this is just sort of a smattering of ideas. And the zone that we're talking about tonight is the special focus zone, which is really the connection between the town village and the residential village. So this section of the roadway for us has a critical need for pedestrian safety. It's an opportunity for connectivity, and if it all goes well, it can be a template for how Shelburne can move forward with other roadways. So as you look towards these roads, or this section of road, on the left you'll see a map that goes from the post office down here. That intersection up there is Church Street. And these are the items that we've accomplished so far to date. So this is 3 crosswalks, a radar feedback sign, and lowering the speed limit on the road. And as we move forward, what we're really interested in is how to layer all of these as we go further and further to further enhance the safety opportunities on the road. So these are items here that are showing approved items that are in the fiscal year 1920. This includes the designated bike lane, painting the fog lines at 10 feet wide, a grass strip separation, and landing pad improvements at the cemetery crosswalk. These are items that we would see as part of the must-do strategy in the near future. So this is filling in the gaps on the roadway. A 3-way stop sign or pedestrian-controlled light, traffic enforcement, barrier protection, speed table, radar feedback sign, additional bollard installation on the crosswalks. These are all items that can help provide a chain that goes from Church Street to the post office along a section of road that we feel like is in great need of improvement for safety. And Jim talked about the idea of the should-do strategy, and we'll show you images shortly showing the current, the must-do, and the should-do. And I think the best way to think about the should-do strategy is, or the must-do and the should-do is the idea of a broken bone that doesn't quite heal right. We're proposing that under the must-do strategy. So how do you provide the ability to walk with a bone that doesn't set right? That would be the crutches approach, doing the things that allow you to walk again. The should-do strategy is more like breaking the bone again and setting it right. And so this would involve larger scale work. This is extending the green strip, rebuilding a sidewalk, potentially shifting striping for extended bike lane, and curbing from Church Street to Marset Road. So this is showing the cemetery crosswalk, and these are images that we've shared before, previously. This is before, and this is actually a couple of years ago, before we had the painted stripe along the east side of the roadway there that has been used as a benchmark for where the green strip will go. And this is showing that green strip at the edge of the sidewalk here. The landing pad, which has been built, this would include the bollards. The crosswalk sign is currently in place as a seasonal item, located a little bit further to the south. And the should-do strategy is pretty minor in this area. This would be essentially putting in curbing and plantings that would allow for the separation from the roadway and the sidewalk. This is a view south from Upper Falls, or looking south from Upper Falls. So this is about maybe 50 yards south of Church Street intersection. This is as it currently is on Saturday. And this would be showing what we would propose would be needed to help or to fall under the must-do strategy. So this would provide the separation that would be required from the sidewalk here, which is currently not just at the same elevation, but it's actually slightly below the roadway elevation adjacent to it. And this would provide a necessary separation. It would include the bike lane that would push the cars further towards the to the west, providing additional separation from the roadway. In the distance there, you can see the green strip. And this is maybe the breaking of the bone to set it right. This would be moving the sidewalk and putting in curbing and separating the sidewalk from the roadway with an additional green strip to the north. And this is a view looking north on Upper Falls as it currently stands, with the bollard separation and the bike lane and the termination, the green strip on the southern end of the street. And then this is the view north on Upper Falls under the should do. So the bike lane has extended further north. There's the additional green strip separation for the sidewalk moving north. And one item that I wanted to add to this, and I feel like part of what we're seeing here is actually something that looks perfectly normal in a lot of ways. I don't think that we're proposing anything that looks bizarre, and that's actually one thing that I sort of struck me looking at this with a couple days separation, some time frame, is that all we're doing is making something that looks correct but can provide that safety. And one of the things that I think is missing in this, and we've been looking our gaze to the north and to the south, is this idea of looking to the east. And we've been so intent on our focus, sort of the weary eye towards the road as we walk north and south, but with that separation comes an opportunity to really pay attention to a large asset for the town, to the park to the east. And this is just a panoramic image taken the other night, but I wanted to just add this as a thought going forward. But imagine this roadway 20 years from now, when those trees have grown, filled in, when we put in the bike lane, when we provided the separation for that roadway, we have the curbing. This then becomes the focus, and we have an opportunity to not just have the bone set right, but we can start to talk about meat on the bone. What is the opportunity for that park, and how can that be used in a way that doesn't just have a lonely bench out in the edge of the field or right on the edge of the roadway, but could become a serious asset if we're really taking serious this idea of growth area 1 for the town. We're focused on this connection. This could become an incredible asset. That's it.
Thank you, outstanding.
Okay.
Questions? Anybody have any? Susan?
Susan McClellan. I live on the upper end of Falls Road, and I'm happy that they have decided that enforcement is part of their program. I'm very happy about that. I think that's a component that had been up in the air. The other thing along this area, when I was out biking the other day, there are the big sewer caps there, and I wonder where those would go. I mean, as far as, would that be in the bike lane, or, I had a hard time envisioning that.
Mhm.
There's like 2 of them, I think, 2 or 3 along that way.
Yeah, I think that they would be there. I think that that's something that we'd have to look at, bike safe manhole covers that would be level to the roadway surface. I think those are all opportunities. I think that also gives me an opportunity to say, we're not the engineers.
Right.
And I think that's an important distinction, is that we're taking this as far as we possibly can as a group, and we really strongly believe in this. We have for years now. But part of this is needing that support and that technical capability to help bring these ideas to reality. It's not just a matter of having the wherewithal to propose something, but it needs the support that would provide for the additional enforcement, that would provide for the technical services to get this into reality.
The other thing I was thinking too is education in the school, as far as, you know, bicycle safety, pedestrian safety, and that whole component too. I think that's a big piece. You see people just walking right out in the middle of the crosswalks without even looking both ways, that type of thing. And I think there's a huge educational piece too that goes along with this beauty that you've come up with. Thanks.
Thank you, Susan. Pete, you had your hand up before Ernie, I think.
Pete Gadju, I live on Hillside Terrace. I travel this road every day, north and south. I can understand the developer's plan as far as sidewalks go and maybe curbing, but I'm totally against the shortening of the widths of the lanes of the road. I think that's a big mistake. There is a small lane right here going north or coming south that I've seen bicycles right in, one right behind the other. Why have we got to put another bike lane on the other side of the road? Why? No need. You want to redo the sidewalks on the other side? Fine, beautiful. But shortening the width of the lanes and all that, we don't need to do that. I've been watching since this committee has started working on here about how many people actually walk from the village all the way down to Marset Road. There's lucky if there's 50 people that walk up and down that road every day. Never mind the crosswalks. You might see more dogs and animals crossing than people. So I want you to really think about this one.
Well, the idea is that you narrow the road to slow down the vehicles.
You really think that's going to do it?
I do.
It's not. It's not. Well, research also can be wrong.
Thank you, Peter.
And how much is the police department involved in this at all?
There would be at some point.
Well,
Why
aren't they now?
They have been informed of this
They're
presentation.
aware of the
The
exercise.
last time this came up, the lieutenant that was there, who is now retired, told the committee that he was dead set against it and wrote a letter to him about it. Nobody ever heard a word about that.
Well,
Imagine
I'd be
that.
interested in looking at the letter to understand what they were
I don't
opposed.
have the letter, though, to be
to.
honest with you, Jamie.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Pete.
What's the problem with the narrowing of the road? Why does that bother you?
There's all kinds of truck traffic, car traffic, commercial truck traffic, back and forth every day. Because out here, they can't, this is all stopped up. In the morning, you can't get down through here, especially in school time. They all go either up to Spear Street, Dorset, or they come down Falls Road to the light and make a right to get back out onto the road.
And you think that should be facilitated?
In what respect are you saying
You
facilitate?
think that should be encouraged or discouraged?
Well, I don't think we need a lot of truck traffic. I totally agree with that. But what I'm saying is, I don't think shortening and making the lane smaller is going to help anything.
You don't think that's going to be an effective deterrent?
No.
Okay.
Thank you, Pete.
Thank you for your time.
Ernie?
Thanks, Pete.
Ernie Goodrich, 651 Falls Road. I appreciate the committee's, all the time and effort they put in to these new ideas. I lived in Shelburne all my life. I've lived on Shelburne Falls all my life. I've monitored that traffic, the automobiles, pedestrians, the bikes. I don't see where there's all these major issues that the committee's come up with. I'm concerned about taxpayers' dollars. It's going to take a lot of money to make these improvements. Where I don't see where there's major issues that we're highlighting here tonight. I'm kind of against all these ideas. I'm always for improvements. Now, when you look at speed, we've changed the speed limit. We continue to look at it and change it again and change it again. I've had the opportunity to be with our police department on weekends at the entry of the cemetery where I'm responsible for monitoring traffic by radar. And on those occasions, which have been several, I've only seen, with a police officer, people doing 41 miles an hour at this highest point. So most of them are doing the speed limit. So my bottom line here tonight is saying, I appreciate all the effort by this committee, but I think we're talking a horrendous amount of dollars for these improvements that are unnecessary. Now, we're talking about changing the speed again. No matter when you change the speed, if you want to go to high to low, the people driving those automobiles are going to do whatever they want. If they want to speed, they're going to speed. If they want to adhere to the rules and regulations of the roads, they will. So I'm just giving you my input here tonight that I've been a resident all my life and lived on that road. I monitor that traffic every day. Whether it's people walking the walkway, the bikes, or the automobiles, or trucks. I don't see all the issues that these people are highlighting.
Thank you, Ernie. Ernie, some people might feel that those who believe that the speed limits aren't for real might be thinking that they're not being enforced. So if enforcement was accelerated, those same people might slow down more often and more regularly than you think.
True, and I agree. You know, we've had our law enforcement set up many times up and down the road. I see them all the time. They're in the church parking lot, they're on the corners, or up there by my place in the telephone. And for the most part, people are adhering to the speed limit. So I'm not aware of any major accidents, only one that happened many years ago with a lady that got out of a car that was parked on the sidewalk down by the church, got out of a car, opened up the door and got out of the car, and was hit by another car. That's the only major accident that I'm aware of that's been on this road. I've lived on this road. I monitor it all the time. I have to go in and out of it. I will give you one thing. Traffic has increased, both automobiles, pedestrians, and bikes. And you don't see a lot of bike traffic only in the evening time and on weekends. And you see the school kids in the morning. But for the most part, that bike traffic's not all that heavy. On the weekends, you got your groups that go. But you know, the Falls Road is probably the safest road in Chittenden County. Whoops, I'm getting excited here. And it's a straight highway. I mean, I understand, I walked that. I used to walk every day, and I still do early morning. Of course, there's no traffic early morning when I get up. But anyway, that's my point.
So,
Thank you, Ernie.
Ernie, the data that we've seen sort of tells us otherwise on the speed. That's the only thing that I'd share with you. I'd like to share some of the data that we've seen as far as just speed goes. I know you've lived here for a long time, and that's telling, and that means a lot to us. When we see data,
studies that have been done.
They've been, collections from 2-3 years back where we're seeing 50+ miles an hour on the road.
I'll give you, occasionally you will see that driver go. But no matter where you set it, Jamie, they're going to be speeders.
Understood, fair.
Right?
Agreed. Yeah, and that's an enforcement issue, but I think it's all cumulative, right? There are a lot of levers that we can pull that we need to consider as a board.
I'd like to review that myself sometimes.
We should. I'm happy to share that with you.
Thanks, Ernie.
Thank you.
Before Linda, there's someone, and maybe even Paul, behind Paul.
Hi.
Hi.
My My name is Eleanor Packus. I live on Morset Road, and I maybe you recognize me because I walk past your house all the time. I walk all the time, and I walked here. And I would love to ride my bike, but I won't ride my bike because I don't think it's safe, and I don't want to share the road with people who go as fast as they do. In terms of why, I appreciate the expense that's involved in making these changes, for sure. But the way that I see it is when I think about the nicest places that I've ever been, the nicest places that I've been are designed for people and not for automobiles. When I think about a strip mall, that's not that nice, but you think about like Church Street or something pedestrian, that usually has a lot more appeal. I would also like to know all the data of the traffic. I had read in the paper that the volume, as you said, has increased greatly. Just in the 8 years that I've lived on Morset, the volume of traffic is enormous. And I guess my concern is our village just becoming a thoroughfare, a truck route. And I think that I'm excited about the possibility of these changes so that our village is a really wonderful, livable place where also younger families with children will want to be. My experience is I have held my breath watching a small child on a bike on this road just recently try to wobbly ride on the sidewalk with cars just racing past and nothing between the kid and the cars. Or I myself one time walking on the sidewalk when a police car went chasing another car, and there's nothing between me and that emergency vehicle racing past. And this example of this road is a great example of how this road is designed for automobile safety. I could easily drive 60 or 70, no problem on this road because I physically can. It's designed to do that. I lived in Europe for a number of years where they really have dense villages and then space in between the villages. And they purposely design their villages so that you physically cannot drive more than 30 miles an hour. It's just not possible because the lanes aren't wide enough, and it works because Germans will drive fast when they can, so it definitely works.
Thank you. Linda?
Linda Reel, Falls Road. 2 comments. I think this is so normal looking when you look at it. And as someone who uses the Falls Road area for walking the dog and about town, I just think that's how it should look, and I feel that's how it should be. So I don't know about the widths of the road and that kind of thing, but to me, that looks normal, and I think that's how it can be, and that's how it should be here in town. My other comment is the crosswalk to Bacon Drive, across Falls Road. All the paint has now worn away. There's not a marker or a barrel anymore. And I know I stand there and quite a few cars go by before somebody will say, oh yeah, we're supposed to let them cross. So if we can jazz that area back up again, that would be awesome. Thanks.
Thank you, Linda. Yes, sir.
Rocco.
Hey, Rocco. You want to let people know?
I'm Steve Antonozzi, more commonly known as Rocco. I've been on the PATH committee for many, many years. I've recently retired from that committee, but I'm still on the La Platte Crossing Committee. And I'd really like to say that I believe this is a really excellent plan. I believe it needs to be executed to have safe transportation for pedestrians and bicyclists. The speeds on that road are way too high for bicyclists, and there simply is not room on that road the way it's configured now for safe bicycling traffic. And to keep pedestrians safe, I strongly recommend to go with the option to get physical separation and vertical separation of the pedestrians from the roadway as much as possible wherever you can. And thank you.
Thank you, Rocco. John? Paul?
All the bicycle traffic on this road right here that everybody's so worried about, I think we have a lot worse roads for bicyclists to worry about. Irish Hill when they're going up the hill and you got bicycles. You got Dorset Street that they're right on there. There's bike after bike on Dorset Street, Shelburne Heinsberg Road, Boswick Road, Harbor Road, you name it. Every one of them is worse than this. There's no room to go off the road. You go down over a bank. And I think it's time that we start thinking about some other roads other than the few people that walk the village and complain about that's the safest road there is right now in the town of Shelburne. If I was going to ride a bike, I've walked that for many years. My brother and I both grew up on that road, and we've walked it probably more than anybody sitting in this room right now. And I've never been scared to walk that road, and I probably won't be. If anybody had been with us tonight on that paving crew down there and watched traffic go by when those flaggers let those guys go, because they're all been out of shape because they had to stop, they're going by that paver, and guys, including myself, standing there, probably 50 miles an hour. Then I sit here on this road and I watch people want more crosswalks. And you can sit there and watch people cross every day and never use a crosswalk. And there's people on that committee that cross. You may have to walk a few feet one way or the other to a crosswalk, but if you want a crosswalk, I would think you'd be using them. And you can sit at Church Street, the crosswalk at Church Street and the Memorial. They walk everywhere but those two crosswalks, every day of the week. So I think we did enough as far as the town to make things better. They're going to put the light out here on Route 7, which I was involved in, and I agree to all that. But I think things are getting out of hand. As far as more on this, I'd rather see some of our money spent on some other town roads that everybody uses, and everybody's worried about a bicycle here. There's more bikes up on Dorset Street than there is on Falls Road. And I will answer Linda's question. The road isn't completed paving yet, but once it is, we'll get the center line in, then it will be striped, whatever we can get. But it's all time, it's contractors, we've got to wait for, everybody's busy. So they are in the mix.
Paul, just so I understand, you don't have a problem with this design, but you think there are other areas that need it more than this?
Well, I don't think we ought to touch this road at all.
But only because you think other areas are more pressing? I mean, if in an ideal world...
No, I still don't think it needs changing.
Okay.
But to put money, keep putting money on a piece of road that I think there's other places, and if you ever go up a hill like Irish Hill and you try to follow some bicycles, and when they're out in your lane and you try to go around somebody and a car is coming down through. And I will tell you, and there's a guy sitting right beside me that drives a fire truck. When you narrow those lanes up, and everybody thinks that they own that white line right there, a fire truck, a dump truck, and whatever other truck you're driving is wider than 10 feet. Mirrors on a truck are 11 feet plus, mirror to mirror. So you narrow that road up to two 10-foot lanes, you're touching mirrors. And if you touch somebody that's walking from that white line to the shoulder of the road, I hate to be the guy sitting in the truck seat, because you've got some liability there somewhere. And all these people that want all this, watch them drive down the road at 90 miles an hour themselves, except for when they want it. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Any other comment? Yeah.
So first of all, I want to make it clear that nobody on this committee is a developer. We all live in the village or in Shelburne. And we're doing this because we live here. It's important to us. Our approach from studying what the rest of the world is doing is to reduce speed by realizing you can't just lower the speed limit or narrow the road. You have to do a combination of things to create an environment that promotes lower speed. One item just doesn't work. Obviously, we have a speed problem still, even though we've lowered the speed limit. I walk this road every day. And I don't drive it, I walk it. And I approach the speed radar every day. It takes me 10 minutes to get there. I can see it the whole time that I'm walking towards it. I would estimate that 20 to 40% of all drivers are 5 to 15 miles an hour over the speed limit at this point. There used to be police cars stationed near the Catholic Church monitoring the speed limit. I haven't seen a police car there in 6 months at least. And I realize that the police are prioritizing Route 7, and that's an issue, and I don't object to that. But the police are not in the village anymore, and they're not monitoring enforcement in the village at this point. So I just want to make that point. As far as the reduction of the lane size from 12 to 10 feet, that's becoming a standard in towns throughout the country. And the fact that the lane is reduced doesn't narrow the road, so there's no obstacle for trucks to go through on these narrow lanes. They can extend beyond the lane. The road itself isn't going to change. It's only the division of space between the lines. That's all that's different. So that is really not an argument against doing this. Thanks.
Ernie, I think we'll...
I just want to make one more comment that Jim just highlighted, the police department monitoring the traffic. And it's been 6 months since he's seen.
How about the microphone?
This is what I'm going to take 2 seconds, nanoseconds. I just wanted to comment about Jim's, when he mentioned about not seeing a police officer set up radar or anywhere along the Falls Road. It has happened, and since I've been back from Florida and I got back in April, there has been police at the church parking lot and other places on the Falls Road monitoring traffic. Witnessed by me.
That's good to hear. It sounds like we may need to do more of it.
Thank you. Jim?
Yeah.
Bill?
Because they've been involved before. Bill Supple, Pearson Drive. Yeah, I was kind of struck, interesting project, but I just wonder if the goal is to build bike lanes or make the road safer. Because if it's to make the road safer, it actually does the opposite. To make the lanes less wide increases the chance of a head-on collision. And most, if there's a, your margin for error is reduced by whatever the percent is. So I think we should say this is to increase bike lanes and walkability, not some convoluted way to say this is going to lower speed. It's going to increase the danger of driving on this road. There's no other way to it's just logical. You make it a more dangerous road to drive on, more accidents are going to happen. People might veer off the road. So, either it widen the road or, like other people have testified, there's bigger problems in town if you want to enhance safety. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Bill. I do think you're going to find that in the body of study and evidence, that as a calming measure, and Jim has made the point that calming measures are effective when they occur in a group, in some number. I think you're going to find that narrowing lanes is a very definite has a very definite positive effect, and I don't quite understand the distinction you're making between those two populations. Safety is safety. Whether it's somebody in a car, or whether it's somebody on a bike, or whether it's somebody walking. So, but we appreciate your comment.
Sure, I can say something too.
It's to the extent that the lanes are narrowed, you're decreasing the safety for the drivers.
That's not what the evidence that's not what.
I'm talking about common sense.
Sorry?
I'm talking about common sense. It's.
Well,
maybe I'm missing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I think Bill's right that the town plan does emphasize bike ped connectedness and safety. So you're right that is sort of a goal that we're trying to get after by looking at this exercise. Whether or not it increases vehicle traffic incidents, who knows, right? I don't think anybody has that data in front of us, but it's a fair point.
But I think along the same lines, I think you kind of got to some of the same point that Pete was addressing, and it's the balance between pedestrian safety versus accommodating vehicle traffic. And of course, the safest thing, and probably most of the people on the VPSG would be happy with, is if we turned it into Church Street. If it was cobblestone and there was no cars at all, that would be the safest thing for pedestrians. If you just want a pedestrian safety, that would be the safest thing. No cars, much safer. And that's common sense too. But if you're trying to accommodate traffic, then sometimes those goals are in opposition to one another. And you made a very good point about the emergency traffic, or emergency vehicle traffic. one piece that I think we haven't really have enough input from is from the police department. When the chief of police, the previous chief of police, came before us about this issue, he agreed with Paul that this was the safest road in the town, and of absolutely no concern. Chief Warden absolutely said no concern whatsoever, totally safe. By and large, people obeyed the speed limit and they were not concerned. However, we haven't heard from anybody in a long time. I think that that's probably a piece that that should be involved the next time this group comes before us and have some idea. As far as studies of traffic, I've seen some things that Bruce has sent us, but I don't think I've seen like an actual study of.
Well, we had local motion counts that were done, what, 3 years ago?
3, I think.
Go ahead, Jane. You know the details.
So traffic studies have been done. I've seen traffic studies since 2015. Well, I have some results from 2015, 17, and 18. Well, I'm going to back up for a second and say, all along through the process of our group working, we have been working with the police department. Al Fortin came regularly to consult with us, and we used his expertise in a lot of the plans that we've developed. We have met with Sergeant Bauerlein 3 times now and included him in as a consultation to our group. So I think that's an important point in all of this. I tried to look back on the studies today to see if I could do some comparison. I was a little bit short-handed because the old plans, the old studies didn't have the location of the study. It just said Falls Road, so there was no way of knowing if it was Lower or Upper Falls Road, as opposed to the one that was done last year that had an absolute, an address where the tubes were put down. So that was a much better data. Unfortunately, last year, the collection happened during the 4th of July week, so it wasn't a good example, although it seemed to hold true to other studies, just lower numbers. So this is just an example. On July 4th last year, there were 3,245 cars that traveled on Upper Falls Road. Now that's obviously both directions. 571 cars were going 10 miles or more above the speed limit. Now, I think it's important to look at actual numbers. 571 cars is a lot of cars in the course of a holiday day to be traveling 40 miles an hour or more on that road. I looked on the 6th of July, and it was similar statistics. So the 6th of July, interestingly, had less cars. That was a Friday, 3,000 cars, and there were 441 cars traveling 10 miles or more above the speed limit. Again, a lot of cars to be traveling a road where there's absolutely no barrier between pedestrians and the road.
Was this after we lowered the speed limit?
That was after, yeah. It was February of 2018 that we lowered the speed limit. So that was the other thing that was difficult in going back in previous years, because we've implemented certain things over the course of time, and I was trying to factor some of these things in, but the biggest problem was the fact that I didn't actually know if the data I was looking at was Upper or Lower Falls Road, so I couldn't do a really good comparison. I did go back and look at 2015 before any crosswalks or anything were implemented, and there was and the speeds were markedly higher during that time. But again, I don't want to present any data without being able to say for sure where it was located.
Jane, how does that number compare to other? Do you have any idea of how that compares to other roads around town?
Well, it's interesting that this road actually gets less traffic than Marset and Lower Falls, because that's a cut-through road.
I just meant as a percentage of cars that go, say, 10% or something.
Oh, I don't know that, because I've only looked at studies that have been done on Upper and Lower Falls and Marset Road, so I don't know that.
Okay.
And then I actually just had one question for somebody on the committee. What's the rationale behind the no parking sign? I'm just curious about along the east side of the town parade.
I think, and maybe other people might have some different answer to this, but the major concern, actually, it's a double-edged sword, because on Farmers Market Day, if any of you have ever tried to either cross the crosswalk at the parade grounds, when cars are parked pulling in and out along that road, it's extremely dangerous. Or if you've come on Church Street, headed towards Falls Road, off of Route 7, towards Falls Road, and try to make a left-hand turn going towards the shopping center, you cannot see if there are any cars coming, with cars parked along there. Now, the other part of that is we want people to stop at the farmer's market, and especially last summer when the parking was reduced in this lot, it was a little bit of a problem, but it is extremely dangerous on Farmers Market Day, both for pedestrians and for cars.
So could we, it's after 8, so I'm conscious of time, but could we just dig in a little bit on the must-do? In the approved and budgeted for section, are there any obstacles to getting these done? Is everything moving forward? Do you need any support from us to get these done in a timely manner?
So I'm not going to speak to that.
Sure.
We haven't striped the 10-foot lanes because, as you know, we're paving the road. So all striping's on hold in this area till that gets done. The grass strip area, not everyone's favorite project, but that will occur. Not quite as long as was hoped for, because when you start getting too narrow, it's simply impractical to try to maintain grass unless you go to AstroTurf.
Yeah.
A new radar sign heading north will happen. I've directed the police department to get that purchased as soon as possible and installed, so we'll have radar sign in both directions. Right? Yes.
Yeah.
Paul, we may need to move that post a bit to get so the solar panel gets better solar access, but that's not a big deal. Landing pad improvement has occurred at the cemetery crosswalk.
Lee, because this is a handy checklist.
Yep.
And I'd like a little more definition about the grass strip. What is your estimate in time of when that'll be put in?
Paul, thoughts on that? Timing, please?
I don't know, within a month or so, or less.
In a month or so or less?
Yeah, probably less than a month. Got a lot going, a lot of help on vacation. Gotta get the right people lined up and cut it.
I can understand that. Well, we'll count on that, Paul.
Can I ask just, oh, sorry.
My other question is that, we all set with that? It's going to be done?
Yes.
It's going to be done in a month or so or less?
Yeah.
And we'll keep asking until it is done.
Right.
And I was pleased to see the inclusion of the bollards, which for some reason I was late in noticing elsewhere, and remember sent a little email to you about, boy, these seem to be pretty effective on Dorset, from 89 up to Kennedy.
Yeah.
And I thought, gee, these things make, it's a very similar circumstance, a very similar situation to us, even including the vegetation. And went back to Lee and said, geez, this, would this not be temporary, understood, but effective? And my understanding was that the first time around last year, that wasn't okay or acceptable, or there wasn't complete agreement.
Well, Paul can speak to that as well. We thought we'd give it a try last year because we thought it would be helpful, and we received less than enthusiastic response from quite a few people about placing bollards at the cemetery.
All right, now we're all together
crosswalk.
on the placement of those bollards, are we? As something we should be doing.
We were.
Yeah, what is the feedback exactly?
The suggestion was that we were creating a significant safety hazard for cyclists.
Yeah.
So the challenge is it becomes a push-me-pull-you approach to things. You can put things somewhere in the roadway that might appear to make some visual separation for pedestrians, but you've now taken up some space for cyclists. So where do people go? And there's no perfect answer to this.
The bike lane remains there. And these are on the outboard side of the bike lane. So how much space is being taken from the bike lane? It's the dimension of the bollard, right?
And the potential, and again, I'm not trying to argue one point or another,
as
but
a visual,
it becomes another thing in the way for somebody to possibly collide with. So you make a choice.
Down there when that was all getting signed up and everybody had their thing they wanted in the underpass on Bay Road, and they were knocked down every day. They were run over every day. You can ask the cops. I put them up every morning when I go through there. There's 2 or 3 took it out. We tried them on Webster Road when we went the one way to the stop sign. Before that guardrail was put in there, we buy those like you get a lot of money tied up in those, they just run them over. If somebody doesn't want it there when it comes to stuff like that, they're gonna take it out for you. So there's 3 places that we have tried.
To my mind, that only demonstrates the need.
Yeah.
If people are willing to run them
disagree
over,
with
then
that.
that demonstrates the need. So, in case of the bollards, we all agree then that those will be, we will implement, we will put those in?
We should be very clear about which bollards and
Yeah, is there a different
where
type of
they're
bollard?
going, because we've seen Jeff had several different slides with different types of bollards in different locations.
Are we talking about
So which ones are we talking about?
Yeah. They're similar to these, especially around the pump, Jeff, and up north when it narrows to the point and disappears in the bushes.
Have you spec'd those and provided a recommendation to?
No,
Okay.
no, I mean, we really haven't. I mean, we didn't really necessarily think it was our job to.
No, I'm not
tell
suggesting
which
it is. I
bollards
just,
to buy.
if the committee has a recommendation or a preference on approach there.
But
Okay.
you've made it a new recommendation, which is what we're responding to. So can we, on that basis, proceed? Do we encourage Lee to proceed with some planning?
What about the plastic ones? And
That's
what went on the
up to
sidewalk
you as a
more?
board. We haven't considered this yet. We're considering it tonight. You're the
Okay.
policy
Let's talk about this.
directors.
Well, maybe there's an alternative. I mean, like those plastic, the thicker plastic ones, and what if they went a little bit more on the sidewalk so it doesn't inhibit the bikers? I mean, is
Yeah.
that a possibility?
Yeah.
It seems like,
You're talking about
I agree with the fact that it
ones-
seems like they're necessary if they're getting knocked down.
That's what you're talking about? Or the plastic ones like on Main Street in
Yeah.
Burlington?
Yep, the wider plastic
Yeah.
At
ones.
Pine Street, those
Yeah.
bigger bollards
And
that are.
maybe they
Well-
edge in on the sidewalk a little bit, but that might be better than edging in on the bicyclists.
Well, how about you
And
come
provide
back
more
next
protection.
meeting with some conclusions on type and placement and the preferred location?
Okay.
It seems to me to be an ideal temporary solution to the most unsafe portion, which is where basically the walkways is the roadway. And,
Yeah, I'd prefer that that this board not
Yep.
get into the business of
Yeah.
speccing that. If you can work with the committee directly and they're comfortable with
Yeah.
it, then
and
I
just let
trust
us
that this
know-
group will be
just let us
comfortable with
know
it.
how
I don't
works
think
out, yeah.
we need to spend meeting time looking at.
Yeah.
Are you taking those out in the wintertime?
Yeah,
Well,
they'd
you
be
have to.
temporary. But I actually have another question about a temporary, and since we have Paul here, I know how you feel about speed bumps. We know. But what if they're the temporary speed bumps during the summer when we do see the most like bicyclist and walking traffic? What do you think about those? And I understand the concern about ambulances going over speed bumps. I understand that implicitly. But what about them? What do you think?
I hate them with a passion, you do what you want, but I tell you, the house they're in front of is gonna complain, because every time a truck goes over that, you're gonna hear that pounded every time a truck or something like that. And everybody thinks that they're never gonna need that fire truck or that ambulance, but when they do, and it's slowed down because of that, that's when all hell breaks loose.
I assume that's what you mean by speed table, or no?
I think there's a difference between Tom's and
Okay.
Audie. It's
Yeah,
difference
talk to
between
us about
speed
that.
bump and a table. A table is broad. It's a much more substantial addition to the road. It's permanent, but it is an effective way of slowing down traffic, and it doesn't create the noise and create the dramatic kind of driving effect that some people experience with the speed bumps.
Can you do temporary
But it's still seasonal, Tom?
tables?
That would be a permanent fixture in the road, and it would, again, would be just another element that would kind of slow down traffic.
They're also hard on a snowplow too, just to let you know.
Okay, this an acceptable
We will come back to you with some options. Yes.
appreciation of sentiment?
On the, I guess before we wrap up, on the should-do strategy, just to sort of respond to Ernie's concern, and I know others, about just fiscal pressures, I'm sure we can secure grant funding for this. I looked very quickly, and I know Bruce has shared some data here around just downtown grants that are available, and I saw that Randolph, St. Albans, Newport have secured 75K plus for these sort of changes. So the funding's there if we ask for it and if we have a plan. So I think we can address the fiscal pressure piece of this on the must-do piece longer term, mid to longer term. And the short term, it's already funded. So it's just a question of executing on the funds that are already allocated and approved by this board.
If I may, I agree with you, and I think that seeking of grants really has to fall into the lap of the town officials.
Agreed.
You know, we're not in a position to
I agree.
pursue that kind of thing.
Bruce, you want the last word?
Yes, Bruce Nunziata Falls Road. I'm not part of the committee. I'm seeing a lot of this for the first time. I think it's excellent. They've done their homework. A lot of these suggestions are things that we've been hearing about for years, working with Local Motion. And, you know, they've done this all over the state, and they realize a lot of the things that we're hearing now are concerns. They call it quick builds. They do it quickly. They do it economically. And if you need to adjust it, it's adjustable. There's, you know, you can make changes. There's, no matter how much you speculate about where the bike is going to go or whatever, actual experience, you'll learn a lot from that. So the quick build, inexpensive, modifiable, and as it was said, you can apply this other places around town. And just one other point. I just feel in general, if you give people a highway, you know they're going to use a highway. I don't care what you make the speed limit. They see this big, wide road in front of them and just want to just go, despite the fact that there's unprotected pedestrians next to them who are just terrified by having cars come this close to them. I think there's ways to do that. Now, the data is overwhelming that narrowing the lanes is a safer option. People aren't going to crash into each other. You know, you slow down. It's more dangerous the wider it is. That's what data is showing us.
Thank you, Bruce. Well, we certainly greatly appreciate this effort, which I thought was extremely well done and has prompted a very good, useful discussion for sure. And we can't.
Could I suggest we check back in the fall? In another 3 months or so on.
I was going to say in anticipation of budget, maybe even earlier, because some of it has great value and worth to us in terms of budget considerations, which are some of the concerns being raised. And
I also ask, it would be nice, I wasn't sure if I should take the order as a ranking and priority in which the items were listed. It might be nice to know which were the most important to least important, or, you know.
I agree.
Thank you. Thank you for the
Thanks,
effort.
everybody.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ernie, Pete, Paul, thank you. The next item is the Quiniesca Shelburne Heights wastewater flow independent engineering analysis.
And I've recused from this,
Yes.
so I will take my leave.
Now, I apologize to those of you who have been waiting on this item. We're generally pretty timely, but in this case, Lee is going to report an initiative that the board took on its own following the last meeting to contract with an independent engineer to conduct the type of analysis that the petitioners in their list of concerns, as well as a lot of their comments, we're eager that we should undertake, and he's going to report the results.
Thank you. So as the chair noted, the board had a special meeting on Friday afternoon after that last Tuesday meeting. We had two quotes from 2 independent engineers. The board selected Green Mountain Engineering to do the study. And many of you have probably seen that letter. There were copies of it up there. The engineer reviewed the as-built plans for the Shelburne Heights wastewater collection system and reviewed the data and plans for Quiniasca's project, and has concluded that there is more than adequate capacity for one collection system to handle the flows from the other. Specifically, there was one pipe noted that would be at 58% of capacity with both systems operational, and all the rest of the system would be at less than that. And that was presuming full flows from all homes simultaneously, which is a rare or never existing situation. You just don't have every single home running every bathtub, every washing machine, every shower simultaneously. So his conclusion was that there is capacity to handle the flows.
Now, the first thing we might do is solicit your comment and discussion about that report.
We've made copies of the report available?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, there were 25 copies
Great, thank
available,
you.
and it was distributed to the supples
Tony?
prior.
Great.
First, I just want to thank the board for taking our petition seriously and taking the initiative to have the engineering study done. That was really appreciated by ourselves and by our neighborhood. We were happy to see that there is the capacity, what's studied, and it does look like there would be the capacity. We want to just make sure, because we understand that this is likely going to be a baseline study for potential more development, possibly across the street, east of Spear Street. There was one email from Chris Robinson that mentioned that they wanted to make sure that the houses existing on Spear Street now would be able to connect as well. So we just want to make sure that the number of homes is adequately represented. So that's one concern. And we...
So the east side, sorry to interrupt, but the east side's not in the sewer service area.
That's right.
Right.
That's the
right.
difference.
I'm aware of that.
Okay.
But things can change.
Of course, the boundary can change.
Right. Right. So, that's a concern. So we were pleased about that, and there were 2, if not more, issues that weren't addressed in the study that we felt, because it's so important to get this correct, and to look at having those also addressed. Bill will be speaking about that more. One was the connection point between the 2 neighborhoods, and we understand why that wasn't addressed, because I believe now it's understood that the engineering for that connection has not yet been done. And we would like to ask as a neighborhood that when that connection is done, that it is designed by an engineer, a wastewater engineer, and that's important. The other thing is the maximum volume, the maximum flow rate. And again, Bill will talk about that just based on a little bit of research that we've done and some other issues too. So anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony. Bill?
Well, I'll echo Tony's appreciation, and that was pretty quick. I did ask if the engineer, Alan Huizenga, if he was going to be here, and I was told no. Is he here by any chance?
He is not.
Okay. And the reason being, I knew there would be some questions. So what the project's engineer had done, and which was echoed by your water quality supervisor, told us that there was capacity. Now we know exactly how much at peak flow, 58%. the question that I have is, and contrary to Andy's numbers, this engineer did factor in what's known as inflow and infiltration, which is kind of like leakage coming into the system, which, you know, changed Andy's. Andy did not factor that in. So he had a peak flow of 102 gallons per minute, whereas the new report had a peak flow of 194 gallons a minute, which is a 94% increase. So the reason I bring that up is, or 198 gallons per minute. The reason I bring that up is that the assumptions and the values that you use make a huge difference. So one thing I would want to ask this particular engineer was just as far as the assumption of the 210 gallons per day from table 8.1. So that I wasn't, Andy used the same thing as well. So I kind of wondered what that was all about. So I read that document, which is not the whole thing, it's like 245 pages. But basically I was unclear whether that was correct. So I called the state today and spoke to somebody in the department that handles this environmental, Andy would know. Anyway, and I was more confused. So I would like to have, it would be nice to have that engineer here to discuss that value. Also, one thing that we were wondering was, again, going back to the assumptions of the Shelburne Heights system, is because the Shelburne Heights system is essentially a retrofitted system, meaning the neighborhood was there, and then the sewer system was put into it, best fit, retrofitted, stuck in, however you wanted to design it, versus the Quinniosca neighborhood where the sewer system is going to be built at the same time the houses are built. So the use of the final engineering plan in doing any calculations becomes important, because any adjustments to that, any jerry-rigging, any non-use of engineering best practices might become important. Now, the reason I bring that up is I'm looking at the Green Mountain Engineer's report, and he said that he uses the as-builts from Dan Scott on September 11th, 2001. Now, what we don't understand is when this project actually was done. So we have a note from Paul Boney, January 24th, 2003, addressed to Shelburne Heights property owners. And he's saying that while the project was fraught with problems, the final product has been certified and should serve the town well for years to come. So either the project was done in 2001, and Paul Boney got around to sending us the letter in January of 2003, or something is out of whack here. So what I would have liked to ask the engineer is, are you sure those are the last as-built plans that you had? That's all. And then finally, some other calculations that I wish he had done was, he pointed out the minimum slope that was in the plans that you looked at, but he never mentioned the maximum slope. And what one concern is the slope of the pipe coming down Potter Place, if that's going to exceed some engineering value known as maximum velocity of the stuff coming down, and if that could damage the pipe. And basically, those are my questions.
Bill, just as a quick, why Potter's Place?
It's very steep.
Is it steep?
Yeah.
Steeps down.
And then in the neighborhood of Ravine?
Well, Potter Place is, I don't know how steep it is, but it's,
okay.
You don't want to ride a bike down it.
Why are you worried about it being steep if it's a gravity-fed system?
That's why. Because, go ahead. Oh.
It's just a long, steep hill, and there are houses at the bottom of the hill. So one of the things that Bill was reading about in this engineering course, college engineering course, talked about that you have to be careful with the maximum velocity, the flow rate, in designing it. And we did not see any evidence of that in the report to talk about the maximum volume. So, you know, you can picture this steep hill. I mean, it's really steep. And, you know, just at the bottom, if you've got more than double the volume now coming in at a very rapid rate, how how it is designed at the bottom where everything collects, that likely has to be re-engineered. And so those connection points, we're just concerned it has to be really looked at, and we sort of felt like this was focused more on capacity, the study, and the minimum flow, but they did not, that we could not see where it talked about the maximum flow rate.
Well,
So-
that's why the engineer
Thank you, Tony.
asked to review the as-built plans so that he could see exactly what was built, not just necessarily what was designed. So he may not have referenced every single data point, but that's why he asked to see the actual plans as they were built in that neighborhood so that he could perform that analysis.
Can I quickly, there's one thing, if I could address that, the reason why we were concerned that those weren't the final as-built was because in Paul Boney's letter to us, what he mentioned was to close out the project. This was written in January 2003. He said, while it appeared to most residents that the sewer project was completed months ago, that was not quite the case. To close out the project, the town had to negotiate a final price with the contractor, and the town agreed to follow up on a few loose ends that were part of the contract. Now, were those included in the as-built? I mean, what were those loose ends? What was that all about? And then, you know, it just goes on to say, while the project was fraught with problems, the final product has been certified. It's the date of it, that this was written January 24th, 2003, and yet it was September 11th, 2001 that the as-built were completed. I mean, that's quite a time difference. So that's why we were questioning that.
None of us were here then to speak to what that was, but it's not unusual that financial aspects of projects end up being negotiated long after the physical construction is done. I mean, an engineer is not going to stamp and certify a set of as-built if they're not complete as-built. It's got the engineer's stamp on it, so.
It does. Okay.
Before we invite other discussion, I've got a couple of comments I want to share with you that Bill and I have had an opportunity to exchange some views, which has been extremely helpful to me, including his provision of Act 250 materials, which I read in more detail than I would have liked or imagined at the start. But that's certainly been a very helpful situation for me in terms of trying to understand the overall problem. My basic take from the start, and by the way, we've asked Jamie to be the liaison to the Shelburne Heights community, which reprises his role at some point to the terraces, you'll recall, in late 2017 when we had a sewer incident. Jamie was involved in that, and for that reason, I'm delighted that he's been willing to take that on. So for those of you in the community, he's an immediate contact and connection to the rest of us, and we appreciate his willingness to take that on. My sort of sense is that this is a bespoke system, and it almost seems as if all of the issue derives from that. That because it was designed only to serve X number of people, it could not therefore serve anymore. That because the residents were asked to pay for it, it could not be anticipated to be used by anybody else. There seems to be a constant thread here of concerns raised on the basis that this is a bespoke system. If this were an element in the system elsewhere in the community where the beginning and the end simply didn't meet any of those criteria, I wonder whether we would be so concerned about the integrity of the system and its capacity. So I'm trying to understand it as a decision the town made independent of waste treatment, basically. The town made a project decision independent of means of dealing with waste, although it happened to be a sewer project. And from that we've arrived at a point some years later with handicaps of not knowing why decisions were made, in some cases who made them, where the whole matter is questioned because now there is a potential connection above. In trying to deal with questions of indemnification, for instance, it's hard to understand what more we should be doing to establish the credibility of what we think is a system that has integrity, any more than any section of the sewer system has integrity, first. Second, it's hard to understand that, it's not hard to understand resident concerns when they may feel as a body that they were misspoken to. That at the start they were assured of one thing that now turns out to be quite different, and because they are not any more confident in that decision, they're willing to question any decisions going forward, including town motive. That's a hard one for us to deal with in terms of any kind of immediate relief. I suspect we might want to continue talking as we are to kind of soften the edges of that concern. But it's an understandable concern. And eventually it leads to a question of restitution, which is almost abstract at the moment until there's some outcome here entirely of an outcome altogether. That's kind of my take. I'm not sure beyond, we took seriously the concern that these figures had not been corroborated by a professional engineer. We took the initiative to arrange for such review, and we went to some pains to be sure that person had no immediate or recognizable relationship to the town, although the cost was double what that would have been for someone who unfortunately has a good relationship with the town. And having produced those figures, I'm not sure tonight now what the next step should be. And we'll be interested to hear from all of you, as I'm sure Jamie, who will be centrally involved, will, and several of us will want to comment further. So, who would like to speak? You want to pick up from there, Bill?
Well, I appreciate your analysis, and I think if none of us was here, we would not even be having this conversation, because if the neighborhood completely changed, the institutional knowledge of this would be gone. And it's kind of a, if I wanted to boil it all down, it's, oh, what a tangled web we weave, sort of a thing, and I've made it clear that I don't think anybody is purposely deceiving anybody. I think it's just my major concern is about assumptions and how they get promulgated through the system, whether it's with the DRB. And, when we look back to the neighborhood was initially mobilized when the development was going in, because we had concerns about this. And when we went to the DRB meetings, we saw the drawings and we were assured that it was going to go down Webster Road. So we weren't paying attention anymore. It was not an issue for us. So that when we found out, 6 weeks ago that it is an issue. We had to fight this battle that should have been multi-years and be reassured we had to do it all at once because there was a deadline. So, that's kind of where we are. And, we just want to make sure it's going to work. And, and just one thing, this will be the last thing I say is, I think, unless it's changed, I think Chris would prefer it to go down Webster Road. Certainly, the people of Shelburne Heights would prefer it to go down Webster Road. There's no risk in that for us. It's just the town that wanted to switch gears and put it through Shelburne Heights. So, that's kind of where we are. And, I'm just wondering if, the risk-reward equation for the town is worth it at this point. If it's all the same difference to go down Webster Road, that might be the most propitious thing to do, easiest thing to do.
You are more than just a student of the situation. You're at this point expert. But if the town were to want to question the current arrangement, design, program prospect, where and how would that work in this process? Just in your view, what would the town do at this point?
You mean if you wanted to change?
Would we intervene in 250, or where? What is the entry point for?
I don't know. I would imagine that ultimately the select board or the planning department issues a building permit, and if they don't do that, then the project stops, or if all the engineering for the Webster Road outlet has been done early on, and if that's still in effect and if that still makes sense, then it should be a relatively easy process. Because again, part of our concern is that the public vetting of this change was slid through based on assumptions, because at the DRB, that changed leadership as well and personnel midstream. So if you go back and you do a timeline, in 2016, that's when this project started. 2017, we're talking about where things were going to go. And then all of 2018, there was no mention in the DRB minutes of the Quiniosca project. And I think other things were going on. It was put on hold, and then that was resolved. And then all of a sudden, January of 2019, now it's back, full force, full steam ahead. And then I got the notice for the Act 250, and I was concerned about the blasting, and then I saw that it was rerouted. So, that as far as what the select board or the town could do, I don't know. But I think there's still time to reroute things without disrupting Chris's schedule, and because that'll work, assuming it still does.
Thank you,
and maybe Chris Snyder would know the process a lot better than I would or Andy would.
You want to? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I think Colleen and I would
just
like
a thought on this. Two things. One, according to Dean Pierce, the DRB actually required this change well over a year ago. So it would actually require amending the town's own approvals for the project. But secondly, with all due respect, nothing has slid through on assumptions here. These plans are designed by engineers. They put their stamp on it. That's their professional seal stating that the design works. So there may be unhappiness, disapproval among the neighborhood about this, but it hasn't slid through on assumptions. And in fact, it was well over a year ago at the DRB level that this change was approved. Maybe folks didn't realize that. I understand that, but it didn't just happen overnight.
Yeah, I mean, the record reflects 16, 17 appearances before the DRB, so it's hard to characterize it as sliding through, but I think your reaction and the residents' reaction is reasonable as far as tracking the process.
Right.
It went quiet, and then the assumption is it's going in one direction, but as we know, things change before the board.
They do change, and if you look at the attendees of the DRB meetings early on, all these people were here. There was a very robust list of attendees. After the decision was made to shoot it down Webster Road, everybody left. Other people had other issues, but basically the neighborhood had weighed in, fought its fight, and our attention was distracted. The only letter that Tony and I got was from Act 250 as a budding property owner saying, think this development's going through. So, and again, I think the institutional knowledge of the DRB had changed midstream somewhere. So I think had that not happened, the people who knew that the neighborhood had a specific issue about the sewer direction, that we could have been notified. That didn't happen. It's no one's fault. And again, I'm saying there's assumptions being made here. Their assumptions are just that. They're based, the neighborhood made assumptions that it was going down Webster Road. If you look at the process of how the change was made officially to go from Webster Road to Shelburne Heights, it was done in a lunchroom. And I don't see where that was an official warned meeting that everybody come back, weigh in, let's talk about this again. We didn't get that opportunity. So I wouldn't say that due process was followed. I would say it wasn't. And again, this is before your time. So you don't have any skin in this game. But the people who've been involved in this since 2001 do. And and I appreciate you're taking our word for this. And that's why we have all these people here to show that we all kind of remember the same thing. And it'd be so much easier to go down Webster Road. We wouldn't have to worry about any miscalculations or any problems. That's all. That's it.
Bill, you probably can appreciate the comment because I'm sure Tony has come home with it many a time, but our skin's always in the game.
Well,
and yeah, I know, but it's interesting. We're taking this as if we were immediately involved. Our serious business is to resolve this in the best way we can. I think there are genuine questions about notice that have arisen. There are several other circumstances recently in town business where similar questions of notice have been raised in terms of people who are impacted, directly impacted. And it may be that we will learn by a plan to take a look at that there are our practices, indeed our ordinance requirements have to change to ensure that all potential property owners that are impacted are indeed notified and so on. So that item, I think, is on the table, will stay there. This is not the only circumstance.
I think that's a longer term.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw this all the time on the planning commission. A bylaw change goes through and only abutting property owners are notified of it. And next thing you know, everybody in the neighborhood's up and wondering. We just saw that down on Harbor Road. We saw it when, telecom facilities come in. It happens all over.
With the previous meeting, there was a mention of putting up streetlights along Falls Road. Those people are going to freak,
So that issue too, as I read the petition, which is our touchstone, that I think we will deal with in time, and I don't. Speaking for myself, I don't think the board's going to find that that's unique to this situation. And again, the question of restitution, it seems to me, is abstract entirely at this point. If we have, by our effort to engage this engineer, built some confidence that the basic flow and volume and capacity figures should be taken with some confidence, I'd be pleased to hear that. I recognize that there are potential changes by formula and assumption, as you correctly point out, but it seems overwhelming that the finding of a system that can handle almost half again, that is only going to be used at half its capacity, basically, seems to be confirmed. And given that, it seems to me further that we, as Tony pointed out, we're beholden to others to deal with the question of connection. I think at the minimum, we will take a very strong interest in the design of that connection for sure, and its location potentially. What I'm after here is what else do you think we should focus on, do you think we should do, even if it may be at the expense of delaying this project several years?
I think just two things that I would recommend for the board. One is to, if you do go forward with this, and actually for the town in general, is to take a look at your insurance coverage for things like this. I know in 2017 that was an issue, and I don't know what happened as a result of that, if you have better coverage now. So that would be one thing to look at, because
we still have the same passive coverage, Tony, and that's why Jamie's going to be so valuable, because that was the very matter that he dealt with.
Your comment is make sure we're comfortable with the limits.
Right.
Right. Make sure we do some diligence around.
Yes.
Yeah. I agree.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, that's the main thing. So.
No, he's really an invaluable resource in that case, because that was precisely the matter, and some inattention for a period of time, no question.
And then the other thing is just what I had mentioned before, is if you could please have an engineer, a wastewater engineer, look at the design of the connection point between Quiniosca and Shelburne Heights, that is designed by an engineer, because there will be a lot of flow coming in. Right now it's just coming in through a line through someone's backyard, and then it's just going to, come into the pipe behind the road. That's one thing. And then also at the bottom of, to look at that maximum flow, and that the connection at the bottom of Potter Hill, that's adequate to handle what is going to be a very, large volume, much increase from what it is now. Those are the two things I think that we're most worried about, unless anyone else has more to add.
It
Can
has
we
to be
talk about
designed
that
by an engineer.
Okay, that's what I want
It has to be. There's no question that public water or wastewater system has to be designed by a professional engineer.
Who is it? Is it somebody that the town hires, or somebody that Snyder
typically
hires?
the project would hire an engineer to design a system that's designed to work.
Okay.
Quiniosca has to present a plan that's got a PE stamp on it. It's as simple as that.
Right, but the connection, my understanding,
connections
right,
and pipes and diameters.
my
and
understanding
pumps
is their responsibility ends where their property line ends, and the town sewer, the town is responsible for its own system. So it's kind of that gray area, does Snyder Development Corporation, do they design Shelburne's connection on the town sewer end? That's all.
Chris, we don't let just anybody design connections to our public systems, do we?
Correct, we don't. And that is designed by Snyder's engineer, by Andy, to make that connection. Any direction, change in flow of a sewer pipe requires a manhole. That's what they're there for. So to come down from the Quiniosca development into the Shelburne Heights neighborhood, they'll be setting a new manhole at the connection at that point, so that the invert will be formed to send the flow in the right direction. It's all engineered. It's the way it's been done. We've got hundreds of locations like that in town. So
the time will come when that will be presented to you as a plan.
Correct. It already has.
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
Andy Rowe with Lame Rowe and Dickinson, just following up on Chris's comment that it already has. It has been. It's part of the plan set that was provided to Alan and part of the plan set that he reviewed. So that connection up to and including the connection point on Colomer Court is included in the plans that was provided to Alan that was reviewed. It was provided to the town. It's part of the plan set that the Development Review Board approved.
So the
So
design's complete?
Correct. There's no gray area or a section that has yet to be designed.
Okay.
The plans are complete.
It's been
The plans
reviewed.
that Green Mountain Engineering reviewed included that connection.
So the connection points that the supples are talking about, these 2 connection points, those are, they're assessed, they're part of this, they're known to be able to handle the flow at whatever maximum slope is coming into them.
I'll just comment on one piece of that. One is an existing connection, one's a proposed connection. The proposed connection is shown on our plans. The existing connection, Chris can comment or confirm, would have been shown on the plans that were provided to Alan for the neighborhood.
And that's the one at the bottom of Potter's. I just want to make sure I'm thinking and knowing exactly what you guys are talking about.
So
Yeah, can you
there's
explain
the
that?
2 connections they're talking about is the one on Colomer Court, by Colomer Circle, where Quiniasca will tie into the line. They came down between 2 property lines along one easement. But as you come down, as that alignment comes in, it comes into the line. It doesn't go into a manhole location. So they'll be setting a new manhole at that location for that change in direction. That's already engineered. That's all already set.
Is that the proposed connection?
That's the one that's already been yes, I guess you'd be.
It hasn't been built yet, but it's
correct.
He's referring to
Correct.
existing connections and proposed
Well,
connections.
the existing connection component is we were talking on Potter Place, which that was designed by an engineer for a slope. That velocity shouldn't change. You know, it's feet per second is feet per second. So it is what it is. It's been designed by an engineer through Potter Place, through that whole entire, based on engineering standards and stamped by a PE. Additional flow isn't going to change. It's
the velocity.
That's not
Got
a
it.
connection point at Potter, right?
No, it's not a connection
That's
point. It's the main line.
max flow
It's the main flow,
concern,
the main trunk line that
calculation
runs
we
down.
might consider.
Oh, okay.
It's the main trunk line that runs
Just
all the way
impression
down through.
point of kind, yeah.
Okay.
And then you have, you know, connections that come in
Mhm.
from the courts that come in and stuff like that.
Okay.
So-
Yes, sir.
Roland Limoges, and we live at the bottom of Potter Place, so we are somewhat concerned about the capacity. You can understand why. And I'm confused about whether a decision has been made now to go through the Shelburne Heights or whether it's still up for deliberation. Are we
been
talking
approved
about
by the
finality
DRB, right?
already, or?
Well, the decision has already been made to go through Shelburne Heights.
So it's a
We're
given.
talking about the effects of that, and we're entertaining discussion and concern because this begins with 2 things that seem very conspicuous. One, virtually all of the affected parties are long-standing residents of a community that were told this would never happen.
Mm-hmm.
And 2, there's a feeling among you that you weren't advised of the change in plans by which it now is happening. Some of these things are matters that we can have some influence on, some are not. And the question is, were we to choose to try to influence at this point of some kind, what could that be? And what would the effect of that be on folks like the Quiniesca project? So that's what we're discussing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We understand the issue of being told that no one else will hook up, and in my mind that could easily translate to, and that's because the system can't take any more people. Now we're being told it can take a lot more people. We understand that conundrum very well, and I'm not sure in the end how comfortable any of us are going to be with an explanation of that. It's a real problem here. I mean,
Can I ask Andy a question, just kind of for my information? Does it matter with our system, does it matter where you hook up? Or is it equal potent no matter where you go? I mean, obviously that wasn't the ideal spot to hook up, but does it matter?
I'm not sure what your question is.
Remember I drew the map last time of where?
Yes, there is.
You're
I
talking
guess
about
it's said another way. Why did you make the connection point where you made it?
That was the only available property owner willing to grant an easement.
Okay.
Mr. Supple's question last time, I think, was generally referring to why not go to the last manhole at Spear Street, for example? Why not go to the end of a run at the end of a street? There's not any real reason to go to an existing manhole at the end of a street or to tie into an existing manhole along a street other than for convenience. In this case, there was a route identified, a property owner willing to grant an easement. It required the addition of it will require the addition of a new manhole along the existing main, and that's perfectly adequate to convey the flow from the new neighborhood into the existing Shelburne Heights system.
Would anyone else like to comment? Sir?
My name is Joe Unser. I live down on corner of Morris and Spear Street. Mr. Story, and thank you for letting me get up here and speak. You mentioned restitution. Is that in regards to the special assessment that we've been paying and are currently paying, will be paying through, I think it's 2022?
Yes, as we read the petition, that the restitution refers to that, to the payment of those fees over time.
Okay, all right. So there is, say there happens to be a system failure, the town will be fully responsible for all of that. I mean, I sit down at like one of the lowest points, I think, in that area. I have a pumping station that pumps up to the road, and I don't know all the mechanicals operation of that. I would like to think there's check valves, that sort of thing in there, but I have that concern. But the town will be responsible for...
Town owns the system, operates and maintains it. It would be responsible for certainly, I mean, great, virtually all kinds of failure. There obviously are some kinds of failure that could result from abuse or whatnot.
I would just, I would say the scope of the town's liability is in the sewer ordinance itself. So I'd encourage you to look at that. And same as it is for me. We're on town sewer, and it's no different, other than this is a new project that.
Yeah, so in other words, you're back up somewhere down there, and that backed up and it went down into my system, which is dropped down from the road. Town would be responsible for that.
Yeah, you wouldn't be treated any differently, and I didn't mean that. Your situation wouldn't be handled any differently than any other user on the system.
Right.
Okay, and every other user on the system, if they had a backup coming into their home because of the failure of the system, they'd get taken care of.
Yes.
Based on their policy and the ordinance.
Based on the ordinance, right. Sort of that's why we have an ordinance in place that defines the scope of the town's liability with respect to the system. So.
Okay.
I mean, there are circumstances where if the terms, the provisions of the audience are, the provisions of the ordinance aren't satisfied, that there would not be that support. But, I mean, basically, you're like every other user of the system. There wouldn't be anything distinctive about how Shelburne Heights is treated.
Okay.
Just to respond to your individual case, you actually have a pump station with a force main. So if there was a backup, it's very, very, very unlikely anything is going to force its way back through that force main, because there is a check valve, so it's going to deadhead wherever your connection discharges into our system. So you have the ultimate best case scenario for never having a backup into your system.
That's good to know. Thank you. So that check valve would be on my side, in my line?
Correct.
Off of the...
Correct. It won't even reach your storage tank.
Yeah, okay.
in your station. It won't even get to that point because of that check valve. If it did, thankfully you would have that storage there, but it should not ever do that, so.
Okay, all right.
They've built in the redundancy, so.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Welcome.
Anyone else?
Very briefly, hi, Tarnferg, Morris Drive. I guess I just want to, in listening tonight about all the different issues that are before you and you're talking about, there are so many examples of precedent in our communities nearby. And I'm very familiar with the Burlington area, having grown up around here, and I'm sure that you've all, and Jamie, maybe you in particular, have heard all the horror stories about Upper Maine and Burlington and the challenges.
Sure.
And so I just want to point out to everybody here that, in fact, we are held responsible to some degree in our own homes. And it often has become a battle between homeowners and cities. And so be very careful to say that, or reassure people that, in fact, it'll all be taken care of.
I certainly didn't say that.
No,
That's
I know
why I
you
deferred to
didn't.
the ordinance,
I just,
too.
Jerry, you did say that. No. And I just want to say that's not been the case historically in the state of Vermont. So I'm not reassured.
I take that criticism absolutely and straightforward, and appreciate you bringing it up. Thank you. You're absolutely right. Any other comment? Tom?
I'll just echo what she said from experience with the town, that if there's a backup that was not specifically caused by an improper action of the town, for example, an act of nature occurred that couldn't be foreseen or whatever, the town's insurance will not pay for it.
And Shelburne's not unique in that respect, as far as municipalities go.
That's a term of our insurance, yeah.
So could we just talk a little bit about the follow-ups here? I would be interested in confirming the 210 gallons per day, just responding to Bill's request for, what does that mean exactly, to the extent Alan can shed more light on it. I'm happy to request that the board go back to him.
I think Chris can probably answer that.
Okay, wait.
Tonight.
We can, I'm happy to hear Chris's, but I'm putting this out there for additional consideration by Alan if there are additional follow-ups. The max flow rate, I would be supportive of spending a little bit more money to calculate that and confirm it. And I would also be supportive when the time is right, which may be now, to validate the connection point, which sounds like it may have been done, but to give you more comfort that indeed that was within scope, we can go back to him and reconfirm that the connection point. I trust what Andy said here, but I think it's worth going back just to revalidate that. And then the last one I had is, this may be tough for us, but the as-built, confirming that date, I'm not sure how we really do that other than, is Dan Scott, SCI, still around? Who did he work for? Is there a way to just go back and somehow confirm that that September 11th, 2001 date was indeed the date of the as-built? I trust that it is, but
just
can we go back and check?
Yeah, well, I believe they were done by Dufresne Henry, which then became bought out by Stantec. The actual date on the as-built is April 2000. There's a handwritten date that says received, September 2011. Alan agrees that's the date he used, but they are stamped and dated April 2000, just so we're all clear using the same numbers. We can ask Stantec if they still even have those old records.
The plans were dated originally April 2000, and Dufresne and Henry received the plans from SCI with all their markups on the plans. Basically, if they had to put in a manhole, the manhole was in a slightly different location, or if the elevation was slightly different because of too much ledge, That's a lot what Paul Boney was referring to with the problems that they ran into up there were a lot more ledge than they anticipated. And Stantec has actually, or Dufresne Henry has actually marked that they received these on 9/11 of '01. So that's what we have.
So the question is,
So those are indeed
are
the
these
as-built.
the actual final as-built?
That's the question.
Mm-hmm.
Looks
That's what it
as
is.
if they are.
That's what it is.
Is the data, Andy, on the connection, is that complete? I mean, is that reviewable and it's in one place and it's all done?
Have you seen this? Andy, which item is it? The connection point, the backup, is A through L? As far as the record drawings that were reviewed? There may be multiple items that
It's
have.
listed as item E, column
Item
report.
E, okay,
To Street A, cross-country sewer plan, sheet 4A.
thank you.
Well, I think Jamie's made an outstanding recommendation. I'm quite comfortable with it. How do you feel?
Regarding the maximum allowable velocity, it's just the velocity of the effluent coming down Potter Place that we're concerned about. And that interacts with the slope of the pipe. So, and a lot of the assumptions look at the assumption of a minimum slope. You know, you don't want things to stop, to get clogged up. But the concern there is there an upper limit to slope, given the geography of Potter Place? You know, and apparently if it's going too fast, it can cause damage to the system. And, you know, I just envision kind of like a roller coaster smashing into a wall and then going. So, and again, it's just, I don't know if that's the case, but it'd be nice to rule that out so that we don't have a fountain shoot up.
Lee, do you want to comment about these next steps?
I can ask Alan what his additional cost will be if there's further review required.
I think that's something that we should do.
I'd like to see us do that.
With this, as rapid a turnaround again as we can, although it may extend more than one meeting, but we'll make every effort to. I would think, I mean, we're talking about a short term.
I mean, it's really two
Yeah.
things. He's providing a little more detail on that 210 gallon
Further
per
explanation.
day.
Isn't that just
further
a
explanation?
It's not really doing more work. It's just
It's a state-
it's just more explanation.
There's one calculation, right? The max slope calculation in the Potter Place vicinity.
And he's going to take a cut on
whatever
the
that's going to-
design, on the,
Right.
and, on the connection.
That's
I'll
it.
let you know when I find out.
Thank you.
All right. Is there any other comment? Thank you again for correcting my enthusiasm.
I wish it was fruit.
All right, thank you very much. We'll be back to you. We'll make every effort to come back on the 25th
See what we can do.
with this information in detail, and as usual, we'll keep you posted.
Isn't our attorney here?
Yeah.
Right, the next item is number 11, finance matters. There are several items included. One, to establish the interest rate to be charged for late property tax payments. Our current practice is to charge 0% for the first month of delinquency and 1.5% per month thereafter. The second item is to establish whether the town will charge the late homestead filing penalty of 3% of the school tax for property owners that file the homestead declaration after the filing deadline. And the third regards records retention policy, which with a specific reference to
Chris,
property
would you mind grabbing Mike? Sorry. Thank you.
property tax, water, and sewer payments. Peter is here to shepherd us through these.
I'm not
Thank you, Mike. I nearly forgot about you.
Okay.
Thanks.
These are all, I guess I would put in the category of housekeeping items. Our town charter does provide that the select board sets the interest rate for late tax payment, property tax payments each year. The penalty is 5%. That is established in the charter, so we can't change that. But the charter does provide for the flexibility to set the interest rate for late payments. Currently, as Jerry said, our practice has been to not charge interest for the first month of delinquency, so effectively 0%, and then 1.5% per month thereafter. The charter establishes a maximum of 1.5%, so we could not charge more than that. That's the maximum the charter allows, but it does provide that it be reestablished every year.
Would you like us to take those up one by motion?
Probably it would be,
right?
yeah.
Did you do?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Is there a motion to that effect?
Move to set the interest rate to be charged for late property tax payments to 0% for the first month of delinquency and 1.5% per month thereafter.
Jamie moves.
Second.
Colleen seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And those opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
The second item deals with property owners who file the homestead declaration after the due date. The statute provides that you can charge up to 3% of the school tax for that penalty for late filing, which would be after April 15th. Generally, we find that the way our tax rates work, the bill is still lower, even with that penalty, to change the classification from non-homestead or non-resident to homestead, owner-occupied. But the statute do provide the flexibility where a select board could decide not to charge a late penalty at all. There is some administrative cost associated with late payments. We have to reissue the tax bill and the associated clerical work that goes along with that. So it's not without cost that we have to handle that. But it does give the select board the opportunity to charge that 3% penalty for late filing or not. And that just applies to the school tax. It's not the total tax.
Peter, is there a motion to that effect?
Actually, I've got a comment about that. So there have been widespread problems with the state's computer system for the filing of the Homestead Act, and I mean, and I recused myself when my husband came before the select board because we got caught in this, and we actually had a letter from our accountant stating that he had filed it, and it was appealed through the state, approved, and then it came before the select board. But it wasn't the only time, and 2 different accounting firms confirmed that. So the idea that we are charging a 3% right away when we know that the state has been having issues with this for the last 2 years, and then having people come through and then we have to refund not just, or once they've changed their filing status, and these are Vermont residents that weren't able to declare again that they are only Vermont residents or that their homestead is in the state of Vermont because of a problem with the system, and then we have to also refund the 3% fee. You know, I'd be more in favor of making it consistent with A. You know, 0% for the first month, 1.5% for every month after that, and if we were going to do anything. But I almost prefer not to do anything at this time.
Do you have any data on percentages of people that there have been an error with? Do we know?
I think last year was particularly difficult. We know that there were a lot of issues with the state not processing them on time, but I believe they did go through that. I think what Colleen is talking about would be issues where someone said they filed it with the state and the state didn't receive it.
Yeah.
We don't get many requests for that, or many issues where that's been the problem. It's more likely the person just forgot to file it after the April 15th deadline. That's been in place for a number of years. Not to say that the state couldn't mishandle something, but I think last year was particularly difficult, but I believe most of those were resolved. I think
in our case, we actually had a printout, the accountant actually had a printout showing that it had been approved, but the state never showed that on their system, but we actually had the printout from the computer.
And in some of those situations,
the matter came to us, and as a board, we abated.
Right.
this
Yeah,
particular
waiver.
matter. So.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say.
I think
You
this
do
is a
have
case where the
ability-
exception proves the rule.
You do have the
Yeah.
ability to waive the penalty
waive the
under
penalty.
Yeah.
extenuating if a person brings in the documentation.
Well, that's what we had with a number
Received
of.
it, then you could certainly waive it. But on the other side, it has been in place for a number of years, ever since Act 60 took place. So homeowners should be aware of it, and new owners should be advised by their attorneys that that's a requirement.
Does it, does the 3% drive any revenue? I mean, you mentioned that net.
Yeah, like I said, the bill for the homeowner is probably lower, but
Right.
obviously a penalty that we're charging, it's in the
penalty is-
vicinity of $10,000-$20,000 a year that we would be receiving for that late penalty.
Yeah. Aggregate, you're
Mhm.
talking about? Okay.
Total.
Entire line item.
Right.
Is there a motion?
I'm not willing to file a motion right now on that one.
I guess I'm not, unless Colleen felt that there was evidence that this was more systemic rather than a couple of click cases. Sounds like it was an oddity, an anomaly.
We had two accounting firms, and they both basically said that it was widespread through the state. Maybe Shelburne's only seen a few, or people who just didn't appeal it.
Right. I mean, I'm comfortable with continuing with the 3%.
Are you comfortable
Continuing,
leaving the
or
20, are you
it-
comfortable leaving the 20K on the table?
Oh, as far as like not being in our budget line
I
item.
mean, that's just 20K that we need to find somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. But this was like this. It says establish whether the town will charge.
Right. So that gives us the authority to assess the penalty. We still have the ability to waive it on a case-by-case basis.
As you've done in the past, yeah.
Which I'm comfortable doing. I think there are exceptional circumstances, as we've seen, and in my short tenure, the board's done the right thing when those requests have come in, so.
But there's
I
probably-
hear the concern. I think it's valid. I think it's a state issue that clearly, hopefully resolves itself.
I don't know. It just seems this is not something that's been in the budget line item in the past. This is new. This is establishing a 3% penalty.
We've been charging that really ever since Act 60 took place.
Every year it has to be established by the
Right.
board, correct?
Yeah, we're
Then
just
it's reestablished, not
Yeah.
established.
So it's been in the budget for several years,
Okay.
along with late property tax
Right.
penalties and interest, so.
I think I feel kind of the same, Colleen. I think I'd trust to our process in the case of some obviously egregious
If
problem.
someone brings us the
such as we've
documentation
had,
that they
where we've
filed
had-
it, and we can.
We've had documentary evidence that
and
makes
we
very
would bring
clear
that
that
to the
state-
board.
Right.
If the owner says it wasn't, that they just missed the due date,
Yeah.
that's a little different situation.
Is
I
there a motion?
understand that.
I'll motion to establish that the town will charge the late homestead filing penalty of 3%. Is that sufficient?
Second? I'll second for the purposes of discussion. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those approving, please signify by saying aye.
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 And those opposed?
Nay.
Colleen opposes. The ayes have it.
The last item is just, Lee had brought up our municipal records retention policy several months ago, which I appreciate him doing. One of the ones I thought we would maybe want to clarify a little bit further, rather than just saying by state standards or IRS standards. We do keep the tickets on your property tax bills that you send in. Candy and Betty Jean in our office document very closely if someone other than the property owner pays that. And we use that information if the account gets overpaid, let's say for the year, to help figure out who the overpayment is due back to. So we do keep those records for a while, but if you look at our storage room, and I hope you don't, there's a lot of boxes in there from years past that we really probably don't need to keep anymore. Since we are talking about tax revenue, someone could come in and challenge us for, why didn't you keep the records as to who paid what a particular year? I think if we established a 7-year limit, That just puts us on record saying that we will not keep those little payment stubs. We do keep payment records, certainly. That goes back a long way in terms of the payments that were made on a property. But as far as what particular person paid it, or what entity paid it, or what mortgage company paid it, I think there's really has to be a limit as to how long we keep that information. So that's why we're recommending to go with the IRS rule of 7 years, specifically for, again, these are the little payment tickets that you send in with your check, as far as who paid those. The actual records of payments and charges, those are stored electronically, and we keep those, definitely going back. So it's really just these little envelopes that we're talking about.
Does anything need to happen with, if we were to approve this, with those records older than 7 years? Other than destroying them, or what would happen in that case?
That would basically be, we would keep the 7-year retention ratio at that point.
Move to approve the updated Town of Shelburne Municipal Records Retention Policy as presented.
Jamie moves.
I'll second that.
Mike seconds. Any other discussion? I think adopting the industry standard makes all the sense in the world here. Hearing none, those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And those opposed, nay. The ayes have it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
4 ayes.
4 ayes.
The next item is to authorize a grant application by the police department.
Yes, this is a grant application the police department hopes to file. It's for just under $4,000. It will allow them to file tickets electronically, where right now it's a very cumbersome paper system. It takes quite a while to get tickets to the Judicial Bureau and have them processed through there. It's 100% funded by the state, and the department hopes that you will authorize the application accordingly.
I'll move to approve that grant application by the police department.
Colleen moves.
Second.
Jamie seconds. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, nay.
Chair,
Yep.
with all due respect, is there a possibility that we could table number 13 to the next meeting, given the time?
You would like to table which?
Number 13, goals and objectives. If I'd move to table that to the next meeting.
I think I was just going to make one comment about it anyway, and we have a guest waiting on number 14 as it is. We're always apologetic when we take more time for discussion than was anticipated, but I think Lee's providing this as a matter of course, and my only comment was that of the things that have emerged recently, several of which we've talked about tonight, implementing the town plan recommendations to me seems to take on a special character. And I've commented to him that it may be he needs to suggest some ways we could make some alterations in what are identified as priority activities to make room for it. I mean, the whole premise is that we pretty well got down on paper what the amount of stuff that could be done in a reasonable period of time. So adding is going to mean subtracting somewhere. And my encouragement tonight was going to be to ask Lee to give us his sense of what could be delayed or post, set out more so in the future in order to make sure the implementation of the town plan recommendations enjoys the status that I think it should.
Yeah, and I'll be glad to do that. My only request with respect would be if we could table this to the first meeting in July, since the next meeting in June I'll be on vacation, and Peter will be handling that, and I'd like to, I need to be here for that conversation.
Well, the value is
but the work continues.
The value is its presentation.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the...
I do want to check in on this, specifically the stormwater public hearing, the information session that we've talked about having this summer.
Yep.
Summer's upon us, so I want to make sure we prioritize that. And then economic development, I know Mike and I both talked about where are we with that initiative, and how can we as a board engage and help orchestrate whatever that. So we'll talk in July, but I just want to make sure.
Did you have anything?
No, that covers.
Colleen, anything? Okay. In which case, we'll move to number 14, which is the executive session, and consistent with our practice, there'll be 2 motions to put that in motion?
I've recused from this, so I'm going to depart for the evening. That's okay
Thank you,
with
sir.
everybody.
Okay, so pursuant to 1 VSA 313, I move to find that premature general public knowledge of the town strategy and contract negotiations would clearly place the town at a substantial disadvantage.
Colleen moves.
I'll second that.
Mike seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, nay. Jamie has recused. Mary is absent.
Pursuant to 1 VSA 313, I move to enter executive session to evaluate the town's position and strategy and contract negotiations regarding a net metering power purchase agreement and to invite the town attorney, finance director, and town manager to participate.
I'll second that.
Colleen moves and Mike seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, nay. Again, Jamie has recused, and Mary is not voting for reason of not being present.
Are we on?
exit, a motion to exit executive session and resume the general session. Any discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And Jamie, who has recused and has left the meeting.
So this was in relation to an agreement between the town of Shelburne and Encore Solar Power Group with regards to putting solar panels on the roof of the Shelburne Library, the new Shelburne Library. And I move to approve entering into 2 group net metering agreements, one between for the Shelburne Library and one for the facility in St. Albans and the town of Shelburne, and also a lease agreement for the roof of the new Shelburne Library, subject to minor non-substantive changes to the second group net metering agreement, and to authorize the town manager to sign on behalf of the select board.
So moved.
I second that.
Mike seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The ayes, and those are disapproving, nay. The ayes have it. Again, Jamie is no longer present, and Mary was not present this evening. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
I
Mike
second
moves.
that.
Colleen seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none. Those approving, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And those disapproving, nay. The ayes have it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank